Hi guys, welcome to this page of the notes, and what we're going to do here on this page is we're going to start to take a look at using some of those operations or performing operations on complex numbers. And I think that what you're going to find is that it's actually pretty much like dealing with real numbers. The only difference here now is that you've got this I involved in there. And remember, I just simply means the square root of a -1. It just means that our numbers are imaginary or complex numbers. And so here's the way it's going to work. In order to add complex numbers, you will add the real parts of the complex number and add the imaginary parts of the complex number. Same is true for subtraction. If you're doing subtraction, you will subtract the real parts and subtract the imaginary parts. So combining like terms, right? That's what we're doing. We're combining like terms. So let's go ahead and do that. In the first one, here's what I've got. I have a 6 plus 2i plus 3 plus 4i. Well, I combine like terms. I have a 6 and a 3. Those are both real numbers, so I put them together. I get 9. 2i and 4i are both imaginary, so that means they're like terms. I put them together, and that gets me 6i. And it is just that easy. What you want to watch out for, though, when it comes to subtraction is just like with real numbers, you've got to be careful of that minus sign. You will need to distribute it through the parentheses. Don't forget to do that. And so I wind up with 5 plus 2i minus 4 minus 6i. And again, combined like terms. 5 and 4 are my real numbers. 5 minus 4 would be 1. 2i and -6i are both imaginary, so those are like terms. Let's put them together. A positive 2i minus 6i leaves with minus 4i. And that's it. Let's try a couple more here. Combined like terms. This one again is addition. So I have a -2 and a positive 1, which should leave me with a -1. And then I have 5i and a -7i, which is going to leave me with -2i. And I'm back to subtraction. Don't forget to distribute the minus sign. 4 plus 6i. Negative times a negative means that I have +1 minus 2i, and we combine like terms. 4 and 1 are the real numbers, so I put them together and get 5. 6i and -2i are the imaginary parts of the number, so I combine those, and it looks like I wind up with a +4i. So that's how you add and subtract complex numbers. You just add the real parts, add or subtract the real parts, add or subtract the imaginary parts. It's just like combining like terms if you were dealing with real numbers, except now we're dealing with these imaginary numbers, again, where I just represents the square root of a -1. It's our definition for the way that we're going to deal with the square roots of negative numbers. So I wind up with these complex numbers. Okay, what about multiplication? Well, it turns out that multiplication is going to be just like what you would do if you had real numbers. We'll need to FOIL it out. You guys know how foiling works. You've been doing it since probably pre-algebra. So here we go. Let's go ahead and FOIL this guy out. First terms, 3 times 2 is going to be a 6. 3 times a -5i is going to be a -15i. 4i times 2 would be +8i. And a 4i times a -5i. Be careful here. I have i's in both of those, and I'm multiplying them together. So the 4 times the -5 gets me a -20. But I times I is I squared. Okay, well, let's go ahead and combine like terms. I have a -15i and an 8i, which should be -7i. So 6 minus 7i. Then I have this -20i squared. Now, we've seen this before. If you go back a couple of pages in the notes, remember we said this. I is equal to the square root of a -1 and I squared. Do you remember what it was equal to? Yeah, I squared was equal to a minus 1. Well, I've got an I squared here. So let's do a substitution. Since I know I squared is equal to a minus 1, guys, plug in a minus 1. That is now going to become a negative 1. And here's what I've got. 6 minus 7i minus 20 times a negative 1, which simply makes this a positive 20. Well, 6 plus 20, 26 minus 7i is your product for multiplying those complex numbers together. Again, guys, all you're doing is foiling. So let's go ahead and try it a couple more times and see how these go, just to make sure you've got the hang of it. Here's another one. Let's FOIL this out real quick. And yes, look, I and I, you're going to wind up with an I squared. Don't forget I squared is equal to a negative 1. 2 times 9 is going to be 18. 2 times, so it's going to be a minus 6i. That's going to be a plus 36i. And I'm going to wind up with a minus 12i squared. Remember, that is a negative 1. Negative 1 times a minus 1. So we're going to wind up with a positive 12. Minus 6i plus 36i would be plus 30. And like I said, that's now going to be a positive 12, because this is a negative 1, and a negative 1 times a negative 12 would be a positive 12. So I combine like terms, and 18 and 12 is 30. I wind up with 30 plus 30i. Again, my complex number. There's my real part. There's my imaginary part. You put the real and the imaginary part together, and you wind up with a complex number. One more for you here. Let's see how this one goes. Again, hopefully you are trying these on your own. So if you're coming back now to check your answer, let's see what you got. 2 times 3 is going to be 6. That's going to be minus 4i. That's going to be minus 12i. And then I'm going to have a positive 8i squared. Right, because negative 4 times a negative 2 is going to be a positive 8, and I times I squared. But remember, I squared is a minus 1. So 6, let's see, minus 4i and minus 12i would be minus 16i. And I squared is a negative 1. Negative 1 times 8 would be a minus 8. Well, here's what I wind up with. 6 minus 8 should be a minus 2. And I have the minus 16i. That's my complex number from foiling. Guys, hopefully at this point you feel very comfortable with adding, subtracting, and multiplying complex numbers. What we're going to do on the next page of the notes is take a look at how we divide complex numbers. So head on over to the next page of the notes, and I'll meet you there.